Hello and welcome to Dice Tabletop. My name is Chris, and in this episode we are going to be getting the wiring done on the Warlord Titan. This is going to be one of the last steps now before we all get together and paint the thing. What I'm going to be doing is I've got a couple of connecting switches, as you can see here. I want the head and the torso to be modular, so I can take the torso away from the legs and the head away from the body. This is going to make it a lot more easy to transport, and also for a second reason that is going to get revealed in the next episode. So the plan with these connectors is I'm going to have two inside of the body and then one on the end of the head, one on the end of the wires coming out of the waist. That way then I can just plug them into each other. They should have sufficient enough strength within themselves, and they should also hopefully be long enough. Here is a rough idea of how it's going to connect through the body. Which means it's back to my least favourite pastime, which is soldering. This should hopefully be the last bit that I'll subject you to now before we end up getting the weapons done. So, learning from all the mistakes that I've made previously and continuing to make more, what I did was get some of the shrink wrap tubing, cut that to size and put it over each of the positive and negative wires. Then on the respective one of the other side of the connector, I just twisted them together and then put a rab of solder all the way up the centre of them, heating up the wire, which made it a little bit easier to connect onto. Once that was done, I was then able just to bend that over, push the shrink wrap tube in all over the solder joint, melt that into place, and that gave me a good strong connection. Did that on both sides and that was complete. Next it was time to solder a connector onto the head. So to start off with, these wires were a little bit too long, so I just cut those down to size a bit. I still want to leave quite a lot of length on this, just in case for whatever reason down the line I need to make repairs. I'm going to have some slack wire there that I can just cut off, put some new connectors on, and I don't have to worry about, oh my god, I've just ruined it because I haven't got any spare wire left available. Okay, that went a lot more successfully than my previous soldering attempts. That connector is now all on. And as you can see, I'm not too bothered about this extra slack. It can just be pushed into the head. And with that all in place, you can start to get an idea of how that's all going to look. After that, it was time to put the connector onto the waist wires. This was an absolute nightmare to do. I didn't even really bother filming. I was too busy concentrating trying to get this to actually work. But in the end, I was successful. And there we have it. That's connected. So it's a good idea now that I just give everything a little try before we go any further. So pushing the excess slack of the wire into the waist there. Same principle with the head. I've got some there left over if I ever need to just cut it back, add a new connector on. Should hopefully give this a little bit of longevity. So here we are, moment of truth. This is pretty much close to the end now of all the wiring, so if I've bugged it up here, it may as well be good night on all of this electronics. So, moment of truth, it still works. There we have it. I'm really looking forward to getting this all built now and seeing how this lights up with the rest of it all painted. So, the next thing that we need to do is now get that middle connector that I made all put in place. The holes that I previously made in the base of the torso aren't going to be big enough to get the cable through, as you can see there. So the first step is going to be making that bigger. Like we have done in the past, I'm just using my rotary bit here and using the sanding attachment. That made light work of the resin. I've been able to make that hole bigger, and now the end of the connector is going to be able to push through there, no problem. And that will connect onto the other end that we've just soldered onto the waist. Now, what I don't want to do is to glue this wire into place. I need to have a little bit of freedom in it so that as I'm pulling on the wires, it's not going to potentially break on the inside. So what I've got here, it's an offcut of some aluminium blinds that I actually had when I was a child. I've held on to them all these years. So what I'm going to be doing is just using this by just cutting a piece off, putting the wire underneath it and gluing either side down. That'll enable the wire to freely move in between it and not get held down. And it was after sticking it down that disaster struck. Upon testing the length of this, I realised that it wasn't long enough whereby I'd be able to hold both sides of the connector to pull it apart at the bottom of the torso. that means that I wouldn't basically, as soon as it's connected, that would be it. I wouldn't be able to take it apart again. Thankfully, however, I managed to get to the super glue before it was fully dried. There's a channel, as you can see, in the middle of the torso that just makes the perfect sense to run the cable through there. That means that I can then use the full length of it. It's not being obstructed by anything. So using the exact same principle, I just glued down either side of the little bracket that I made. As you can see, this now gives me a sufficient enough amount of room that I can hold onto the connector and I'll be able to plug it into the one at the waist and take it apart again. I wasn't fully happy with the bracket holding it in place as it was. It looked a little bit flimsy and I need this just to hold in place because once this torso is all glued together, there's no way to get back inside it. So I cut a slightly bigger strip of metal that was just going to go over the original bracket that I first made, just to really hold it in place and make sure it doesn't move anywhere. There we have it. With that in place, the wiring is done. Drum roll please, because we are getting on to building the torso now. This is it. We can finally just close it all up. First thing we need to do is get one of these reactors stuck on. So there is a handy little groove at the back. I think I pointed it out in a previous video. That lines up with this bulbous bit at the back of the reactor. So once I get those two lined up, I can push it into place from there. So first thing is I just get super glue over all of the connecting points that I can, line that up, firmly secure it in place, and that is not going anywhere at the moment. Next is onto the center of the carapace, and I kind of made a bit of a mistake with this. I pushed it up too close to the first reactor, as you can see there on the left hand side. By the time this was all glued together, it is leaving a slight gap, but I'm not too worried about that for reasons I'll come on to when you see it on the screen. So with that all dry fitted, it was time to put super glue all over the middle of the carapace. As I say, I pushed it slightly too close against that reactor there on the left. But you'll see when I get this right side on, using the exact same principle as the one on the left, there's a groove cut out of the back, so I've lined that up, pushed it in place. You'll see here the slight gap from the carapace. I was holding it firmly together to try and close that up as much as possible. It's not too much. You'll see there on the right hand side it doesn't perfectly line up. However, once there's the two cowls that go around the head which completely hide all of that, and then when it's all painted as well, you won't notice it too much. With that done, it's time to start connecting the arms, and I nearly made a fatal mistake with this later on, and thankfully I caught myself in time. These had already been pretty much made to fit from the preparation video that I did at the very start. Only some minor fiddling that I needed to do to get them to fully fit. So just a matter of covering each side all in super glue, all of the contact points, pushing them into place, making sure that then they were completely horizontal so the arms aren't sticking up or down too far. And that one was looking good, so we can move on and do the next one. Exactly the same principle as before, just a quick little test fit, and then once I know that that's all going in there no problem, cover the whole thing in glue and push it in place, set it and forget it. Next is the big shoulder mount, and this is where I almost made a fatal mistake which would have ruined the rest of the build. These fitted in still very well, however I want to do a little bit of adjustment. I did that off camera, made those fit really well, put super glue over all of it, and gave it a good firm press in place. There we have it, that's looking really good and it lines up well. So let's see how I connect the arms. Surely I'll be able to connect the arms. Oh no, wait. So what I realised is that this pin needs to go in very much first. Thankfully I did that before the glue dried because I do not think I would have been able to get that piece out once it had set. With the other parts being hollow, it would have just completely snapped. It would have been game over for this build and I do not know what I would have done. So very much thankfully I recognise that. Put these two pins in place. I haven't glued them at all. I want them to be free. That way that when I connect the weapons on, they're going to be able to rotate left to right. I've also got some magnetisation planned for those, so they should hopefully be able to point all around the battlefield once we get it deployed. This one on the right hand side needed a little bit more fan dangling, so after trimming that down a bit I put super glue all over the surfaces, gave it a good firm press, making sure that both of them lined up and everything was level, There we have it. This is it. The torso of the Warlord Titan is built. It is complete and it is huge. It has been a long time coming getting it to this point. There we have it with the shoulder cannons, missile fiery things. I can't remember the name of them. I also couldn't help resist but test out some of the armor panels and how they are going to look once they go on. As I say at the start, there is only going to be one more video now that I need to do next, which is going to be tightening up all of the loose ends. We've got pistons to put on, I've got some magnetization to do, and I've also got a big reveal that is going to be coming next time. There you can see as well the cowl, what I mentioned, how it's going to get covered up. So the only thing left to do now is just to see how this all goes together. That connector is a little bit fiddly, but there is sufficient enough space for me just to get it connected up. I just got to be careful every time I put it on and off. I'm not really going to be taking this anywhere. It's just going to sit nicely in my gaming room. It's a hobby thing for myself. So I very much hope that you like this video. Thank you ever so much for watching. As I say, it's a very big video next time. So thank you, like and subscribe, and I will see you all again soon. Goodbye.